Hello there. How's it going today? Everyone doing well? All right, good to see you guys. Thank you guys so much for being here today. We have a great service planned for you. We're just so glad to have you. If this is your first time here, or maybe you've been here just a handful of times, we just want you to know that we're so glad to have you as our guest today. Just so you know, there's a lot of ways to connect here. One thing, we've created an environment specifically designed for you. In our lobby, it's called The Hub. It's a great place to ask questions, to find out more about who we are, why we do what we do, and what we do. Lots of ways to get connected, like serving or getting a group or those sorts of things. So feel free to stop by and have a conversation with somebody at The Hub. If you're feeling a little introverted, we have a card in the pocket of the seat right in front of you. You can fill that out, drop it off in a bucket a little bit later, and or drop it off by The Hub. We'd love to connect with you. Listen, this weekend was an amazing weekend for the next generation, specifically for junior high and high school. We had our in-town retreat called Best Weekend Ever, and it was totally amazing and totally lived up to its name. I don't have time to tell you all the amazing things that happened, but I will say this. Last night, our message, the bottom line of our message for teenagers, is really powerful. It was this. This is the truth that we communicated over and over and over again, is that your past does not disqualify you for the future God has for you. That was what our teenagers, and it was impactful. And for so many of them, we had several teenagers take first-time steps to put their faith and hope in Jesus Christ last night. It was just an amazing weekend for our teenagers. You know, what we do for kids and teenagers is so important. This is a critical time, and we're just getting started. Actually, in just a few months, we're launching 6 Love Works serving trips all over the country. We're super excited about that. Applications are open now. They close in 1 week, but we've got a couple trips for preteen. We're sending a group of preteens to Tucson. We have a group that's working with Navajo in northern Arizona. We've got a group, a parent-child trip to Mexico to work with our partner, One Mission. We've got an amazing trip to San Diego for junior high, and 2 trips for high school, 1 to Chicago and 1 to New York. So amazing opportunities for our teenagers and preteens to put their faith in the driver's seat, to step up and serve others very different from themselves, and so it's a great way. So if you're interested in more information about how you can send your preteen or teenager on a LoveWorks trip this summer, you can go to missionaz.org/LoveWorks, just Mission AZ. You can find out all the information. Applications do close in 1 week, though, so don't miss out on this. Man, we're so excited to have you here. We're going to have our worship team come up and lead us in some songs, and Joel's going to come out and wrap up this series on intimacy. So if you would stand up real quick and greet somebody beside you, give them a fist bump, high five, let them know how good it is to see them today.
Your love so great, Jesus in all things. I've seen a glimpse of your heart a billion years, and still I'll be singing. Oh, I cannot praise you enough. I cannot praise you enough. Oh, you are the Lord. You are the Lord Almighty. I'll shine in the stars, sing the Lord. Your love, oh, your love is like the wildest ocean. Oh, nothing else compared. Creation calls all to the Savior. Oh, we are alive for your praise in earth and sky. No one is higher. Oh, our God of wonders, you reign. Our God of wonders, you reign. Yes, you are the Lord. You are the Lord Almighty. Come on. I'll shine in all the stars, sing the Lord. Yes, your love is like the wildest ocean. compare. Not to us, but to your name we lift up, oh praise. Not to us, not to us, but to your name, oh we lift up, oh praise. Come on, join me. Not to us, but to your name we lift up, oh praise. Not to us, but to your name we lift up, oh praise. You are the Lord Almighty. I'll send all the stars in the Lord. Oh, your love is like the wildest ocean. Oh, nothing else compares. Yes, you are the Lord Almighty. I'll send all the stars in glory. Oh, your love is like the wildest ocean. Oh, nothing else compares. Come on, let's lift this up together. Not to us, but to your name we lift up, oh praise. Not to us, but to your name, oh we lift up, oh praise. Not to us, not to us, but to your name we lift up, oh praise. Yeah. Not to us, but to your name we lift up, oh praise. You are the Lord Almighty. Yes, I'm shining all the stars in glory. Your love is like the wildest ocean. Oh, nothing else compares. I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah, oh louder than the unbelief. Come on. Yes, I raise a hallelujah. Oh, my weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Oh, heaven come to fight for me. Yeah. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. Oh yeah. All right, come on, I raise. Oh, I raise a hallelujah. Oh, with everything inside of me. Oh, I raise a hallelujah. The darkness will flee. Oh, I will watch the darkness flee. Yeah. Oh, I raise a hallelujah in everything. Oh, in the middle of the mystery. Yes, I raise a hallelujah. Feel lost, you're all on me. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm.
creation, the God of heaven knew our names, and formed in his reflection, we are his glory on display. And his heart is good, he is always come. With the cross he proved he's on our side. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. No matter where we go, we're close to the Father's heart. And though we stumble, he will not let us fall. We are the Lord's, and he will never forsake his own. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. Oh yeah, we are. The love he lavished on us, he called us children of the King. And in his loving kindness, he chose the lowly and the weak. And his heart is good, he is always kind. With the cross he proved he's on our side. Can we sing this together? We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. No matter where we go, we're close to the Father's heart. Though we stumble, he will not let us fall. We are the Lord's, and he will never forsake his own. We are the sons, we are the daughters of God. Oh yes, we are his children. So when the lies speak louder than the truth, remind me that I belong to you, yes. And when I can't see past the dark of night, remind me you're always by my side. So when the lies speak louder than the truth,
Well, as we were preparing for that song, I've thought about this a little bit. That most of you don't know this, but my wife and I were expecting our first kid in just a few months here. We're really excited. But with that, people tell you all the time that like, oh, it's gonna change everything for you. But what I didn't realize is that it would change the meaning of some simple words to me. And with this song in particular, the words son and daughter and children of God has really taken on an entirely different meaning for me. Our little boy is not even here yet, and my wife and I both love him so deeply. And the ability to call him my son is unexplainable. And so I was thinking about this song and the context of lyrics and how God looks down at us and also calls us sons and daughters. We are sons and daughters of the King, the creator of everything. And that term has such an endearment to it. And I feel like I'm finally beginning to grasp what God means when he calls us his children. See, he looks down at me and he sees all the mess that I've created, all of the mess that might be wrapped up within who I am. And he sees past it because of his love. And he proved that love 2,000 years ago when he sent Jesus to die in my place and in your place for those things, that mess. See, that mess, the things that we do, the things that we don't do not discredit his love towards us. It doesn't lessen his love towards us. He looks at us and we are his children. And so I hope that you leave here today knowing and remembering, being reminded of the truth that the creator of the universe looks at you dearly and loves you. You are so loved. I hope that rings true for you today, that you know that is true about you from God. We're going to continue today. I'm going to invite our volunteers forward, and we're going to give of our tithes and our offerings. You can go ahead and grab a seat.
We're brought here today by the love that Sarah and Davis have for each other.
I can't believe I get to marry him. We're perfectly compatible in every way.
Yeah, she just gets me, man.
Someone to talk to all night long.
Someone to talk to all night long.
Early morning jogs.
Sleeping in late.
We'll spend the holidays with my parents.
We'll spend the holidays with my parents.
We'll have one well-behaved daughter.
We'll have 4 or 5 little dudes running around.
He'll help me pay off my debt.
I should probably tell her about all my debt. Is that important? We'll share a bank account.
Obviously, we're gonna share a Facebook account.
Do I need to friend my in-laws?
Someone to do my laundry.
Someone to do my laundry.
Double income.
Stay-at-home dad.
Meal planning, of course.
Takeout.
The city.
The burbs.
Mission trip.
Ski trip.
Blue.
Red.
Cat.
Dog.
Fries.
Rings.
Potato.
Potato.
Minivan.
Motorcycle.
2 words. Finished basement.
2 words. Man cave.
Oh, he's so smart.
Do you think that birds wish that they had hands?
We're going to be so happy.
We'll be so happy. I'm gonna crush it at being a husband.
Oh, I'm gonna miss that video. Anybody else gonna miss that? Oh, it's so good. It's good. Well, welcome back. If you haven't been with us the last few weeks, we've been in a relationship series, and truly, I was bummed, and we missed being away last weekend. But was it not a gift having Mike Foster here last weekend here at Mission? For those of you who were here. He's so great. Great friend and loves being here. And by the way, that was the text I got. It was like, hey, this is such a great church. I love being at Mission. You let me know. I love to come anytime. So it was just great him being here. Thank you so much for making him feel welcome. Today, we're actually concluding our relationship series, but I'm going to tell you something special that we're going to do at the end. For those of you who want to continue on and you sort of want to dig a little deeper into some of the content we've talked about over the last few weeks, we're going to give you a specific thing or a way to do that, and it's something we've never done before, and I'll tell you more about how you can engage with it at the end of the service. But if you haven't been with us, we've been talking a little bit different about relationships. We've been sort of talking about the inner workings of relationships, hence the title, Anatomy of Intimacy. This is not sort of high level, how to communicate better. It's not a self-help series. I've told you that before. This is about the 4 primary components of intimacy. And we talked about accessibility the first week, humility the second week. Last week, Mike covered exclusivity. And today, we're going to talk about security. And there's so much more to all of these things, but our approach is more about what does it look like to have a relationship that moves us back towards what God originally designed for us to experience. What does it look like for us to experience a relationship that was described in Genesis 2 in the account of the creation of man as a relationship that a husband would have with his wife, where the two of them, when God could describe it any way he wanted, he said that they were naked and they were unashamed, which is another way of just saying that there was nothing between them, that they were completely one. There was a oneness they experienced that was like the oneness that God, they were different in kind, but they had the capacity to experience a oneness unlike any of the other animals on earth. And very first week, we talked about the fact that all of us walk into relationships, whether you're in one or you're in one right now or not, whether you're getting ready to start a new relationship, whether you're trying to get out of one. Every relationship, a romantic relationship you jumped into, the truth was you walked in carrying 2 boxes, whether you know it or not. If you haven't been with us, you just need to know, and don't let this be a turnoff because it's true of all of us, you got stuff. You got stuff from the past, and some of it's good stuff. You have some tangible stuff. Some of you have some assets, but you also have some liabilities. You've had some things that you've learned, and you have some skills, but you have some things you need to unlearn. You have some habits, but you have some habits that need to be broken. And you have a series or a box of stuff that you carry in a relationship, but then you also have desires. And these are desires about all manner of things. And you look through the lens of your relationship, and you can't help this, but you want to see your desires fulfilled. Some of them are connected to this relationship, desires you have about this relationship. Some of them are about how the two of you might journey toward desires that you have in the future. But we all, whether they're stated or unstated, we walk into a relationship with 2 boxes full of our stuff and our desires. And that may seem fair or not to you. I would just say it's a fact that this is what happens. And what we said was that the real goal is to take my stuff, and ultimately what God designed is for a oneness of relationship, so that my stuff becomes our stuff and my desires become our desires. And we begin to put these things together in a way that we take ownership for each other's stuff, and we take ownership for each other's desires. And we've been talking about that through the course of this series and what that looks like as we put those things together. Now today, this series is gonna come full circle. And I wanna go back to the beginning and sort of tie all of these things together, because what we're gonna talk about today is sort of the baseline and the foundation. And I know it's kind of funny that it's at the end, but it's the foundation for all the other weeks. Week 1, we said that intimacy requires accessibility, which just makes sense. The more access you give somebody in your relationship, physically, emotionally, spiritually, the truth is the more intimate the relationship becomes. You think back to when you first started dating, the more information you shared, the more assets you shared, the more of yourself that you shared, the more of your ideas, the more of your opinions, the more of your feelings, the more of your physical self you shared and gave into the relationship, the more intimate it became. But the number one reason we restrict access in a relationship is because of insecurity. And this just makes sense. If I don't feel safe, I'm not gonna open up. I'm not gonna let you in, or at least I'm not gonna let it happen more than once. If I open up, if I sort of am willing to share some of my stuff with you, or if I'm willing to share some of my hopes and dreams and desires with you, and I get burned, the next time I'm not gonna be as likely to be accessible or to share, to be sort of somebody who gives you access into my life. And we talked about the fact that the level of access we give in a relationship, it needs to mirror the level of commitment in a relationship. And sometimes there's greater access than there is commitment in a relationship, and that creates insecurity. Other times there's greater commitment than there is access, and that actually creates insecurity in relationships because accessibility requires security in order to experience intimacy that God designed for you to experience. Now, here's where you're gonna have to hang with me because it's gonna take me the rest of our time to sort of convince you of this, but here's the truth about security in a relationship. Security is actually a choice. Now, you may not think it's a matter of choice, but it is a matter of choice. And there's actually one specific choice that each of us makes every day in a relationship, in our relationships, that either cultivates or erodes the level of security in our relationship. Most people don't think that the security of their relationship is their choice. In fact, oftentimes I talk to people and they're like, no, I don't want to be insecure, but because of their behavior, I'm sort of held hostage to my partner or my significant other or my spouse's choice and the way they choose to behave in the relationship. But that's actually not true because you have a choice, and there's a choice that you make that either continues to erode or develops new levels of security in your relationship. So the question is, what's this choice? And I'm not gonna give it to you. I just wanna sort of leave that question out to hang because I wanna let the scriptures answer it. But what's the choice every one of us makes that we don't realize we make every day that makes all the difference? The answer is found in 1 Corinthians 13 above all verses. If you have a Bible or if you have a device, I'd really love for you to turn so that you can follow along with us today. 1 Corinthians 13 is often referred to as the love chapter. And I mean no disrespect if you had this read in your wedding or one of your kids' weddings, but oftentimes we use this as sort of this ideal, this flowery, poetic language about what love is, and it's read, but the truth is that was not the Apostle Paul's intentions at all. He wasn't trying to give us sort of a poetic description of marriage or of love that we could read at a ceremony. He's actually trying to rewire and retrain a group of people as to how they should look at love. And here's why. Specifically, as it relates to involving God in our relationships with one another. This was a brand new concept. This is hard for us to grasp, but he's writing to people in Corinth who previously were the worshipers of the Greek gods and goddesses. And in that system, the Greek gods had no regard for people's relationships with one another. They just didn't care. It's not that they didn't believe that the gods cared about the world. They believed the gods cared mostly, though, about themselves. And they didn't really care. It wasn't important to the gods about how they treated each other. It was, were they willing to appease the gods and were they willing to give the gods and make the sacrifices and do the things that the gods wanted them to do so that they could get from the gods what they wanted from them? And if the gods didn't care how they treated each other, why should they care? There was no horizontal morality. This was only about a vertical relationship with the gods. And the Apostle Paul's writing them going, this God, the God who created you, he cares deeply about your relationships with one another. It's why Paul he writes about so many things that are relational. Because previously, especially in the two letters to the Corinthians, they only thought about religion as vertical. And he's going to know God cares not only about your relationship with him, but your relationships with other people, specifically this marriage relationship, this intimate relationship that he designed to happen between a man and a woman. And in this chapter, in 1 Corinthians 13, we have all the feels because it has this idealistic, but I would say even almost unrelatable or unrealistic picture of what love is. And even, just hang with me, don't get too mad, there's even a part of it that I think like it doesn't even make sense, and it's even a little irresponsible. We'll get to that in a minute. But as we dig into this, you're gonna realize, and I apologize if I'm ruining your picture of 1 Corinthians 13 and it hangs next to your pictures from your wedding. I apologize for all that, but the reality is this is a challenge. This is a bar. It's a high bar and challenge to sort of self-assessment as to what you really believe love is. 1 Corinthians 13, it begins this way, beginning of verse 1. He says, if I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong and a clanging cymbal. And I believe Paul, as he says in another place, he's sort of the Pharisee of all Pharisees. He's the keeper of the law of all keepers of the law. He's sort of putting himself out there, so going, hey, this is true of me. If I'm somebody who, I have these abilities and I can speak and all this is true of me, but I don't have love, I'm just like a gong. I'm just making noise. And if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, I seem the religious of the religious, and I don't have love, I am nothing. If I have the ability to speak and I have all this knowledge and I seem super religious, but I don't have love, there's no value in that, is what he says. And I would just, as a side note, and this may seem precarious, but I just want you to know, if you choose to evaluate people like me or Mike, who was here last week, or any of our other pastors, somebody who stands up in front, who can speak the talk and can speak very religious and has all the eloquent words and can sort of talk about the scriptures, and the truth is, if it's not motivated out of love, if they have some of these gifts and they have all this information, this knowledge, and they don't have love, here's what the Apostle Paul said was that doesn't really count for anything. That doesn't tell you how spiritual a person is or how good a Christian somebody is. If you want to know how spiritual I am or how good a Christian I am, you should ask my kids. That's who you should ask. You should ask my wife. You should ask them how I behave once I leave here and I go home. How do I treat them? The Apostle Paul says that a talent, ability, knowledge, it may seem religious, but it's not really good for anything. That's not really anything when it comes to what the type of relationship I'm wanting you to have with other people. He goes further. He says, look, even generosity, if I give all I possess to the poor, and I give over my body to hardship that I may boast, so that this would reflect on me well, and that's why I do it, because I don't have love, I gain nothing. If I give to get, in reality, that's all I'm gonna get. I don't get anything else. You get nothing. So if you don't have love, you are nothing, is what he says. And if you don't have love, you have nothing, which seems a little bit harsh. But the truth is none of us are actually personally bothered by that. You don't take that personally. It doesn't hurt your feelings, and here's why. It's because you think you act out of love. And I think I act out of love. We have our notion of what love is, but do we really know what it is? Do we know what love is? Do you know that long before Foreigner asked the question and wanted to know what love is, the Apostle Paul actually, inspired by God, told us and defined it. And here's what I want to do for the next couple of minutes as we unpack this. I actually want to do a little bit of self-assessment. I actually thought about having you stand up and then you could sit down, disqualify yourself once we got to something you didn't live up to. But I realized we would all sit down really, really fast, because here's how he begins. He says, love is patient, and then I'm out. Like, I got to sit down. Because there's lots of times I'm not patient. And I can't wait, and I'm tired of waiting, and I'm ready for something to happen. I'm ready to move. I'm ready for somebody to get their act their act in order, and whatever it is. And we have a hard time in our relationships and being patient. But if you're perfectly patient, you can still hang in there and you can stay standing right now. But then love is kind. You have to be kind all the time, not just when you feel like it, not just when people are being kind to you. It doesn't envy. It doesn't get jealous when the other person gets to do things you don't get to do, when they get to go off with their friends for the weekend and you're stuck at home with all the kids and taking care of all the kids. It doesn't envy. It doesn't boast. It's not proud. It doesn't act in a way that dishonors the other person, ever. It's not self-seeking or selfish. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs, which I'll just time out. Can you imagine if we just got that one right? That's nervous laughter right there. Like, we're all scorekeepers, aren't we? Like, we like to keep score. It's like, well, last time you got to do this, so now it's my turn. Or you did this thing and that you messed up, so now you owe me. And it's like, we do this all the time. He's like, look, love doesn't do that. That's so dumb. That is not what love is. You think you know. You think you act out of love. You think you have love, but this is the list. This is what describes love. He goes on, he says, love doesn't delight in evil. It's not trying to catch other people doing the things wrong, but it rejoices with the truth. Now, when you put it that way, it's sort of like, does anybody really love? I mean, does anybody really embody this sort of love? Paul's like, I'm not done. I got 4 absolutes. He says, look, love, it always protects, always. Not just part of the time. It's always in protection mode when it comes to the person or the object of its love. It always trusts, it always hopes, and it always perseveres, which sounds beautiful. And it sounds awesome and it sounds inspiring. But I'll just tell you, if you think critically like I do, there's part of me that thinks like, I don't even know this is realistic. I don't even know this is smart. I actually think this might be a little irresponsible. I mean, love always trusts. I mean, that come on, Paul. And it gets worse than that. The original language, the always trusts, it actually means believes everything. Love believes everything. That seems incredibly naive. That seems like I'm gonna get myself into trouble. But here's what the Apostle Paul's saying. He's look, here's the deal. This is what love does. Love believes the best. It believes the best. Here's what love believes. Love believes you're so worth it. You're so worth defending that I'm gonna always seek to protect you. You're so worth believing in. And believing that I'm gonna do everything I can to trust you and trust in you. You're so worth waiting for that I'm gonna hope and I'm gonna believe that one day something's gonna turn around or something's gonna change or we're gonna get there. I believe you're so worth fighting for that I'm gonna continue to persevere because that's what love does. Love believes the best and it continues to persevere. You know, there was an article written, secular article, and it was published in a psychological journal, the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and it was done by a bunch of university professors. It was led by a woman named Sandra Murray from University of Buffalo. And the title of the article, if you want to look it up, is called Benefits of Positive Illusion. Benefits of Positive Illusion. It's a secular study, and here's why I bring it up, is because it says the exact same thing that the Apostle Paul's saying. Here's what their conclusion was. After doing a study of lots of couples that were married, couples that were dating, couples that were engaged, couples that were in long-term relationships, here's what they discovered, that the couples with the highest levels of satisfaction in a relationship rated each other more positively in every quality than their partners rated themselves. Here's essentially what happened. The couples with the highest levels of satisfaction in their relationships actually had a view of their partner, had a view of their spouse, had a view of their significant other that went far beyond that person's view of themselves. It was sort of like that when their spouse or their significant other realized they had such a high view and belief of them, they didn't want to let them down. They wanted to live up to this, and as they called it, illusion of who they really were. It worked sort of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It wasn't an expectation of like, here's the bar I expect you to live up to. It was an expectation of, this is what I expect of you because this is what I believe about you. It called them to something greater. The problem with this oftentimes in our relationships, and the reason we can't do this, the reason we have a hard time experiencing this is because there's often gaps in our relationship. And I brought a couple of friends to actually help me today to illustrate this. Here's what happens. We have relationships, and in our relationships, there are certain things that happen. And at one point, you know, it's like you get married and it's like, yeah, we're right here and we're right next to each other and we're gonna share everything. We're gonna share our bank accounts and we're gonna share our man cave or finished basement or whatever it's gonna be. Like we're all together and all this. And then there's things that happen that force us apart. And sometimes it's maybe just a little thing that happens and it's just we're a little bit apart. And then it happens again. And it happens again and something bigger happens. And then it doesn't get resolved. And what happens is there ends up being this gap that happens. And this is anything but intimate. This is anything but the oneness that God designed for us, because there are things that happen and you fill in the blank. Whatever the thing is that happens in here, it creates a gap in our relationship, a gap in our ability to believe the best. It happens when what we expect doesn't equal what we experience. When what you do or how you behave doesn't align with what I expected from you in terms of the way you behave. You were late again. You didn't call, or you didn't tell me this was happening or what had happened, and I had to learn from somebody else, and it felt like it was a secret, or the story didn't add up, or what the person you're in relationship with, what they said they would do, or what they should have done, or what everybody knows a good husband or a good wife should do was not what they did. Here's what happens. It creates a gap, this relationship, and it forces you to make a decision. And it forces you to make a decision of what you're gonna place in the gap. Because we all, believe it or not, make no mistake, you place something in the gap, and it's one or two things. You either choose to trust or you choose to be suspicious. You choose to trust or you choose to be suspicious. You either choose to believe the best, and as the Apostle Paul said, to protect them, to protect the relationship, to protect their reputation. You choose to trust them. You choose to hope that it's not what you would think it would be. You choose to persevere in the midst of that, or you choose to let your mind wander. And you choose to be suspicious. You choose suspicion. And what suspicion actually does, it actually creates a greater gap. It widens the gap and it erodes intimacy because it says, I didn't believe you. I didn't trust when something didn't match up, when something didn't line up, because this is where suspicion comes from. Suspicion, I can't really say that. Suspicion comes from what I see and who I am. What I see and who I am. Make no mistake, part of it is what we said a minute ago. What I expected and what I experienced didn't line up. That's their stuff, that's their behavior, that's their pattern. But there's something else going on that we rarely talk about, we rarely take ownership for. There's also who I am. See, part of my suspicion doesn't just come from what I see, because what I expected and what I experienced didn't match up. Part of it comes from my past experiences. Part of it comes from my past hurts. Part of it comes from my insecurities. And I become suspicious because of what I suspect might be going on with you, because I may have seen something like this before. Maybe it happened to me. Maybe it happened to one of my parents and I watched it happen in a failed marriage, or multiple failed marriages, or multiple failed experiences. And here's the thing. It becomes really difficult to trust, because this doesn't just involve trusting, it involves being trustworthy as well. But did you know that people who are trustworthy actually have an easier time trusting than people who aren't trustworthy? Do you know why that is? Because people who are suspicious assume that other people are doing the things that they're doing. People who are suspicious assume other people aren't trustworthy, because oftentimes people who are suspicious aren't trustworthy themselves. And so there are all sorts of things that happen, that who I am and my character and my past experience, it's not just what I see. And that's why there's things, and I meet with couples all the time, things that are really actually something really small that's blown way out of proportion. And it's because people got suspicious, and I got suspicious, so I responded a certain way based on my suspicion, and you responded based on your suspicion about my suspicion and how I responded. And these things become tangled, and these tangled webs, and they're things that started out as something really small, but because of the roots of these things, because of so much being involved from our past and our hurts and our other experiences, these things become massive just because we choose to be suspicious. But instead, there's an opportunity for us to choose to trust. Now, this is so challenging, because it's like, yeah, but what about when I saw her? We're gonna get to that in a second. Just hold on a second. What if you just decided you were gonna choose to trust? And some of you may go, what does that look like practically? I'll tell you, first of all, it'll bring you closer together. When somebody realizes, you know what, there was a gap there. And they didn't understand the gap, but they chose to trust me anyway. That actually draws people, this is the goal, draws people toward one another. That creates greater oneness. Choosing to trust means that when there's a gap, I will believe the best. I'm gonna choose to find the most generous explanation for your behavior, and I'm gonna believe it. Even when it doesn't make sense to me. I'm gonna try to think of, instead of being suspicious about all the reasons you might be trying to get one over on me or hurt me or be selfish, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna choose to come up with the most generous explanation, and I'm just gonna choose to believe it. Some of you, that bothers you. You're like, yeah, but so you're just saying I should ignore what I see? I should turn a blind eye? No, of course not. You shouldn't do that. But when there's a gap, you should choose to believe the best. And when you can't believe the best, you should decide that you're gonna go to them. When I can't believe the best, I'm gonna come to you. And I'm gonna talk about it. I'm not gonna come and I'm gonna attack you. But I'm not gonna let my mind wander and be tempted to formulate destructive beliefs about why you did what you did. I'm gonna come and I'm gonna choose to trust you. And I'm gonna say, hey, listen, I'm having a difficult time with trust, but I just need you to give me some information, some explanation that can help me continue to guard the trust that I have for you in our relationship. And there's a gap. And there's a gap in our relationship. And I was a little bit tempted to be suspicious, but I know better than that. I know there's gotta be a great explanation for why this didn't add up, or why the bills didn't add up, or why the timeline didn't add up. Could you just help me so that I can continue to trust because I believe you're trustworthy? Now, these sort of conversations don't have to happen that much if both people are being trustworthy. It's a whole other situation if somebody isn't committed to being trustworthy in your relationship. If when you go to them, it's like over and over, they sort of hem-hawing around, and I'm gonna give you a story, and it's again and again the same thing. When somebody refuses to be trustworthy, that's a whole different thing. And I'm gonna tell you what to do about that a little bit later. But here's the thing. This isn't what we're assuming. People in a relationship are choosing. I want there to be trust in our relationship. I want to be trustworthy, and I want to be able to trust you. When trustworthy people engage in a relationship, what happens is they often create when a gap gets created, they actually try to close the gap before somebody even has to come to them. So if I create a gap in the relationship, I'm gonna come to you and go, hey, listen, I just want you to know this thing happened, and I'm sure you're wondering. And they may not be wondering. They may be going, you know what, I didn't even notice, I didn't even think about that, but thanks for telling me. That actually builds trust. When I bring forward something that might have created a gap, if I'm willing to go first, instead of you catching me and having to ask me, I'm gonna go forward and go, hey, I don't want you to have to even be a little bit suspicious. I want you to know exactly what happened. And if I messed up, I'm gonna tell you that I messed up. I'm gonna choose to be trustworthy so we can continue to maintain trust in our relationship. Because trust is the building block for security. When you come to me in that manner, I know now that I can trust you. I feel much more secure in our relationship because of the way you dealt with me when there was a gap in our relationship. And when there's security in our relationship, then I'm willing to be even more accessible to you, physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. I'm willing to give all of myself in the relationship to you, because I feel secure. And when you experience that type of security and accessibility, it builds greater levels of intimacy in a relationship. See, insecurity in a relationship, it drives us towards independence. Insecurity leads to independence because it's a reluctance to trust. I'm not willing to trust you with my feelings. I'm not willing to trust you with my stuff. I'm not willing to trust you with my future because of the lack of trust that exists in our relationship. I become insecure, but when there's trust, it builds security. I'm willing to open myself up. I'm willing to let you in fully. I'm willing to give myself fully. I'm willing to always protect and to always trust and to always hope and to always persevere. You see, choosing to trust and choosing to be trustworthy creates momentum because intimacy involves dependence, not codependence, but a willingness to be dependent, to put ourselves to risk, trusting one another, choosing to trust and choosing to be trustworthy. So I'm just gonna net it really simple. You're going, okay, that's really great. That's a really great diagram, and those people are a little bit weird looking. But here's the thing, it's a really simple question, is when there is a gap in your relationship, when you experience a gap, question is, do you tend to believe the best or assume the worst? When it comes to your spouse, when it comes to your significant other, here's how you know whether you have work to do or not. Here's how you know whether you're choosing love or not. That's the Apostle Paul said, not me. Do you choose to believe the best or do you assume the worst? See, every single time there's a gap, you have this choice. maybe to press a little further, what would your spouse or your significant other say? You may not want to ask them this question outright unless, you're ready for a really, really honest answer. But here's the thing, I wonder for you, like, what would your spouse say? Would they say, if they were being really honest, if one of their girlfriends or one of their guy friends were to ask them about their spouse, hey, does your spouse, when things happen or they don't add up or you're late or something seems suspicious in a relationship, do they believe the best or do they assume the worst? What do you think they'd say? See, that'll tell you whether you have some work to do or not. Now, that's why the Apostle Paul, in this inspired ancient wisdom, it's why he said, love does not delight in evil. It's not trying to dig up garbage on people. It rejoices with truth. The question is, what do you believe the truth to be? See, for some of you today, the question is, you have a gap. Where's the gap? Is there a gap in your relationship because of something financially? Is there a gap in your relationship because of something professionally? Is there a gap in your relationship because of communication, because of physical intimacy? Is there a gap in your relationship because of parenting? Is there a gap in your relationship? My question is, what are you filling that gap with? Because you have a choice. You can either choose trust or you can choose to be suspicious. And if you choose suspicion, you choose to remove the intimacy in your relationship. But if you choose to trust, you'll continue to build security, which will foster greater accessibility, which will lead to intimacy in your relationship. Here's my question. If there's a gap, there's a gap. Would you be willing to take responsibility for filling the gap? Do you know that that's what trustworthy people do? Whether they created the gap or somebody else created the gap or some freak set of circumstances created a gap, trustworthy people go, you know what, there's a gap. And I want to make sure the gap gets filled with the right thing. And I want to choose to trust. And if I can't choose to trust, I'm going to come to you so that we can preserve trust in our relationship. Now, I know some of you think, you have no idea. I mean, okay, that sounds great, and it's a great illustration, and I like all your little words, and it makes sense, and it builds up, and it seems like that's what the Apostle Paul is talking about. But you have no idea what the gap is in our relationship. And you're right. I don't. Some of you are going, we've had this gap for years, or we're never going to solve this gap. We're never going to get through this, and I can't continue to trust. This last week, my wife and I had an opportunity to get away for a marriage retreat. It was an investment in our marriage. It's something we choose to do on a regular basis, and this was a really amazing, unique experience we'd never had before. There's an organization that called WinShape. It invests in marriages, and they do these adventure trips, and you have to be invited to go on it. We got an invitation to go on this trip, and I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but we got invited to go on this trip, and it's a week on a boat with 4 other couples, and you spend a lot of time sort of like taking temperature of how are things going in your relationship. What's the health of your relationship? Like what are some things you need to be challenged in? Where are areas you need to grow in? And you're sort of trapped on a boat with a bunch of people having these discussions for a week, which I know for some of you sounds like terrible, but I'll just tell you guys, there's fishing involved and snorkeling. It's in the Caribbean, so it's really, really awesome. But we're on this boat, and it's I'll just tell you, it's some of the most life-giving experiences we've ever had as we shared and were challenged by these couples and the mentor couple that was there to invest in us and challenge and lead us. And as a part of the experience, we all sort of share the highs and lows, the good, bad, and ugly of our marriage, stories of life to this point. And one of these couples, they were the last couple to share. I could tell they were sort of trembling. And as they told their story, they got to one point, it was sort of they were him-hawing, and finally she just said, look, here's the deal. Here's what happened. We got married, and we were really young. There was a big gap in age in our marriage, and my husband was career-oriented. He was working 80 hours a week. He was focused, and I just started living. My sister and friends, they were all still single. I just started living like we were still single, and I'd go out and party with them all the time, and I had a one-night stand, and I was unfaithful to my husband. And she said, and I didn't tell anyone. And she said, I came up with I held on to a 10-year secret of infidelity in our And it slowly just eroded the intimacy that we had in our relationship. And she said, as I grew in my faith, I recognized more and more God was nudging me to confess, to go and to tell him. And she's like, I was terrified. I couldn't do it because I just thought it'll be over. I don't know what's gonna happen. And eventually she said that she came to this place where she felt like God was going, I'm not asking you to trust him, I'm asking you to trust me. Will you choose to trust me by doing this, by being trustworthy? Even though you weren't before, will you come and will you fill this gap in? Because she knew there was something that wasn't right. And after 10 years, she confessed. And it wasn't pretty. Trust was gone. Intimacy was destroyed. But something remarkable happened. God began to work on him. And in time, God began to challenge him that it was his turn to trust. And in his words, he said, the truth was, it wasn't me and it wasn't her. I couldn't trust her. I was having a difficult time with that, but I felt like my Heavenly Father was asking me to trust him in the same way her Heavenly Father was saying, would you trust me? Will you do this my way? Will you pursue what I want? I don't want anything to be between you. That's my design for you. That's my dream for you. He was asking him to trust his Heavenly Father with this relationship. He said, sort of in his own words, that in time, because of his trust in Jesus, God brought them back together. And it's a beautiful story. It's actually an amazing story. They have such an incredible testimony and they're impacting so many people's lives. But here's a couple people who thought there's a gap that's so big. She knew it. And then when it came out, he knew it. And there's this massive gap and there's no way to fill in this gap. There's no way to fix this gap. This gap is so wide. You're never gonna get these two people back together. And their Heavenly Father said, try me. Trust me. There's no gap too wide. Both of them with tears in their eyes. As they told us this story, this is what they said. We wouldn't change it for the world. Truth was, it was the hardest thing we've ever been through. It's the hardest thing we've dealt with. But it's forged an intimacy we would have never experienced otherwise. We realized if we can trust God by removing everything from our relationship, removing all secrets, choosing to trust and being trustworthy in a relationship, we can choose him to trust him with this. We can trust him with anything. Here's the thing you need to know. The security of your marriage and your relationship is not in your ability to forge accessibility or to forge security or to forge humility or exclusivity in your relationship. Those are important. Those are important bones and structures that we need to have in our relationships, and they're keys to intimacy. But there's a foundation in your relationship and the security of a relationship and your ability to believe the best for one another is in the power and life of Jesus that resides in each one of you. See, this is why I have a hard time when I talk with people who aren't believers in Christ and it's not a Christian marriage. It's really challenging. I don't judge, it's just difficult. Because it's hard for me, it would be hard for me to believe in you if you don't have the life of Christ in you. But for two people to have the life of Christ in each other, when you choose to believe in your spouse, you choose to believe in Jesus, not in them. And it's powerful what Jesus can do when you choose to believe in him and believe the best because his life is at work in your spouse or in the person that you're in the relationship with. The truth is, in these types of romantic relationships, God's inviting both of you to trust him as your ultimate security in the relationship. And when he's the foundation and the bones of your marriage, that's a house, that's a marriage, that's a relationship that won't fall. We're gonna close with a song. It's a song that recently I heard, and I don't actually know exactly what the song's written about, but it's called Bones. It's by Maren Morrison. The truth is the song talks about when you have good bones, when you have a solid foundation, the truth is that's a house that doesn't fall. And here's what I hope. In the next few minutes, as Kelly comes and she sings a song for us, I just want you to reflect. I just want you to think about. I want you to remember. I want your hope to be restored. I want your ability to believe the best to be heightened, because you recognize that if you choose to believe in Jesus and his life in the midst of your relationship and in your spouse, the truth is you build a house, you build a relationship that can stand up against any storm that comes against you in life. Let me pray for you. God, I pray for somebody who's here today, and the entire time we've talked, from the moment they saw the gap in that relationship, they knew exactly what was in the gap. They knew exactly what created the gap. Maybe it's something they struggled with for a really long time. God, I pray that you'd give them the wisdom, the courage to realize that you're bigger than that gap, that you can close any of those gaps. You just ask us to trust you by choosing to protect and choosing to trust and choosing to hope and choosing to persevere, choosing to trust and to be trustworthy, and allowing you to work in our midst. God, I pray today that somebody would courageously take the step today or this week and the days ahead to choose to trust you by filling in the gap, by being somebody who's trustworthy and building trust to lead to greater security and greater accessibility and greater intimacy in their relationship, and that you would forge something that they never thought possible because of the barrier that they saw, because of the gap they saw, but that you would supernaturally work in a way that only you can. And I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
We're in the home stretch of the hard times. We took a hard left, but we're all right. Yeah, life sure can try to put love through it, but we built this right. So nothing's ever gonna move it when the bones are good. The rest don't matter, yeah, the pain could feel, the glass could shatter, let it rain, 'cause you and I remain the same. And there ain't a crack in the foundation. Baby, I know any storm we're facing, blow right over while we stay. The house don't fall and the bones are good. Yeah, yeah. And call it dumb luck, but baby, you and I can't even mess it up, although we both try. No, it don't always go the way we planned it, but the wolves came and went, and we're still standing when the bones are good. Rest don't matter, yeah, the pain could peel, the glass could shatter, let it rain, 'cause you and I remain the same. When there ain't a crack in the foundation, baby, I know any storm we're facing, blow right over while we stay. The house don't fall and the bones are good. The bones are good, yeah, yeah, yeah. Bones are good, the rest don't matter. Pain could peel the glass could shatter. Bones are good, the rest don't matter. Pain could peel the glass could shatter. When the bones are good, the rest don't matter. Yeah, the pain could peel, the glass could shatter. Let it rain, 'cause you and I remain the same. When there ain't a crack in the foundation, baby, I know any storm we're facing, blow right over while we
So here's, yeah. That's awesome. Thank you, Kelly. So here's the thing, we don't want to just send you off. I know some of you have questions. A series like this creates more questions than answers oftentimes. And so we're going to try something unique. Actually, next week, later in the week, my wife and I and a counselor, a friend of ours, are going to host a free online event where we're going to answer questions. Any questions that you have related to this series, the content of today, or anything related to intimacy and relationships, we're going to take our best shot at those things. We're going to broadcast it next week and then replay it a couple of times. We'll give you all information about that. But if you have questions that you'd like for us to address, myself and Jen and our counselor friend Midge, you can text your questions. I think we're going to put a number up on the screen. There we go. To 480-545-4024. We'll leave that up for a minute. Take a screenshot of that, a picture on your phone. I'd love for you to send us some questions. We're going to be collecting questions this week. And we're going to get together. We're going to put together some helpful content to try to answer some of your questions. And then we're going to broadcast it online to try and make this a little more interactive so that we can be more helpful. And for those of you who want to take the next step and want to begin to apply this, we're going to give you some very specific next steps you can take to continue to grow in your intimacy. So we're going to see how that goes. I appreciate any questions you have, and we'll try to tackle any and all questions that we can get. Next week, if you're a Call Mission Home, we have a really, really exciting, in fact, I'm wanting to burst. Next week, we have a really exciting update. You're not going to want to miss next week if you call Mission Home, so make sure you come back next week. And then in 2 weeks, we're starting a brand new series called The Legend of Joe Jacobson. It's about the life of Joseph, Jacob's son. Did you get that? The Legend of Joe Jacobson, that starts in 2 weeks. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Chris Brown's actually gonna be a part of that if you're here. He's gonna be here back for that series. So yeah, that'll be fun. You guys have a great week. Make sure you text us your questions. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you next Sunday right back here at Mission.